Indiana Jones fans have been sitting on the edge of their seats ever since it was announced that a brand new Indy will grace the silver screen in 2019. But with that excitement comes a lot of hesitation. Is Lucasfilm gonna disappoint us again with something even worse than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Crystal Skull was widely panned by Indiana Jones fans who thought that the whole alien plot thing was a far cry from the usual religious quests and dangerous magical adventures that Dr. Jones always seems to find himself in. And let's be real, the ending with the crystal alien morph is one of the stupidest endings I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of stupid shit. But even though most fans can agree that Crystal Skull is the worst Indiana Jones movie ever made, I have to disagree. For starters, it was 100 times better than the Star Wars prequels. There was no Jar Jar equivalent, and we finally get to see Indy with a leading lady that doesn't make my ear holes bleed. The best part is, if you study 1950s and Cold War history, you'll find that the movie was historiographically right on point. I'm Whitney Van Lanningham, and this is my take on why Kingdom of the Crystal Skull wasn't the worst movie you've ever seen. For starters, let's break down why people hate this movie so much. Aside from the fact that Shia LaBeouf's character is basically just Danny Zuko with a switchblade, there were a lot of flaws in the plot that were laughably terrible. We've got the CGI fire ant scene, which was basically identical to every scene in The Mummy where someone gets devoured alive by scarab beetles. We've got Irina's death scene in the alien chamber where her eyes explode from having too much knowledge jammed into her brain by spacemen, and don't even get me started on that nuclear blast refrigerator scene. I get it, fridges used to be lined with lead poisoning in the 1950s, but nothing would save you from a close encounter with Fat Man or Little Boy. Besides, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt in that thing. If the blast itself didn't kill him, the bouncing and falling would break every bone in his body, and Indy would spend the rest of his life beating up Nazi sympathizers in an assisted living home. Plus, he rolls out of that fridge when radiation from the bomb is still in the air. I get that they scrub-a-dub-dubbed him to get all the bad stuff off, but we've all seen pictures of people who survived the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II, and we know that he'd be riddled with cancer the second he popped out of that fridge. Scientists are still studying the long-term effects of atomic bomb exposure, and I don't think that Kali Ma strengthened his heart enough to fight them. But now let's get to the good stuff. I know you're all probably rolling your eyes because you can't get past the whole CGI alien scene, but hear me out. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is actually the perfect historiography film to give viewers a closer look at all the fears the Americans had during the Cold War. The writers of Indy 4 actually made really smart references, and every single plot point in this movie had a 1950s time period connection. If you look at Crystal Skull like a period piece, Indiana Jones kinda starts to make sense again. Now I know what you're thinking, but Whitney, there were aliens, that's so lame! Fox Mulder called, he wants his X-Files back. Hate to break it to you dudes, but this movie was actually right on point for the 1950s obsession with extraterrestrial life. Think about some of the alien horror movies that came out during that time period. The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds, Forbidden Planet, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Plan 9 from Outer Space, and a bajillion more that you probably don't know about because none of them are on Netflix. Our obsession with aliens actually started in the 1940s when people started reporting UFO sightings across the United States. And in the aftermath of World War II, people started anxiously preparing for the impending apocalypse. In fact, the Cold War only propelled society's fears of flying saucers because all reports of UFO sightings were largely suppressed by the military and the US government. I guess they didn't want to get us nerds raging about extraterrestrials when Russia was looming ever closer to nuclear warfare, but most people took that as a sign that the government was hiding something from them. Government officials were actually trained to convince people that their experiences had rational explanations, but unfortunately for them, it backfired, causing witnesses to double down on their stories and start theorizing that the government was hiding something from them. Everyone in film school talks about the fact that zombies were used frequently during the Cold War to represent America's deepest fears: communism, atomic destruction, raceless elimination, and mass contagion. But most people overlook the fact that aliens in the 1950s held the same weight. Now that I've bored you to tears with the historiography of alien fear, let's get back to our guy Indy! I have to admit, as a person who loves studying the psychology behind cultural obsessions like aliens and zombies and movie monsters, the 1950s Cold War tropes in this film are a little heavy-handed. But to the average person who didn't spend the last 2 years of their film degree writing research papers about this shit, I'ma break it down for ya. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull covered every possible fear of Cold War America into one adventure movie, and I gotta say, it's pretty impressive. The movie starts out with Indiana Jones getting taken to a warehouse in the middle of nowhere by the KGB to help them find a lost artifact he helped unearth during the war. We later find out that he was forced against his will, along with his comrades, to aid the US government in a secret recovery mission. And let's just say the military wasn't very forthcoming about what exactly he uncovered for them. Hint, it's definitely an alien. After punching a few KGB guys and finding that box for them, Indy escapes on a rocket sled, which I also don't think that he'd be able to survive. The US used these rocket sleds to test ejection seats for aircrafts, and the sleds often reached speeds of over 6,400 miles per hour. What the hell? I get the spins just going on a roller coaster! There's no way that Indy would be able to stumble away from that without major equilibrium damage, but whatever, it's a literal and metaphorical vehicle to take him to the next ridiculous scene. That's when Indy finds a nearby town to hide from the Russians in, but surprise! The town turns out to be fake, and it's all about to get blown to bits by a nuclear testing facility. Indy has about 10 seconds to seek shelter, so he does what any death-fearing human would do and hides in the fridge. The blast bounces him far enough away from the mushroom cloud that he's able to walk away unscathed, which doesn't make any sense. But do you see where I'm going here? In the first act alone, they peppered in 2 little Cold War history nuggets, and even though I think it's a little heavy-handed for the first 30 minutes of a movie, I kinda love it. Then, of course, we have Shia LaBeouf's character Mutt, who, I hate to admit, is totally spot on for a greaser in the 1950s. If only they had broken out in a Kaneki-style dance number in that diner instead of punching a football player! The chaos levels would have been the same, except, you know, with a little greased lightning thrown in there. I gotta admit, Mutt is a little bit of a whiner in the first half of the movie, but after spending time robbing some graves with his dad in South America, he starts acting more like Henry Jones Jr. and less like Luke Skywalker in a leather jacket. I actually kind of wish that Shia hadn't gone crazy so that he could be in the 5th movie, but what I wish even more is that he had just started screaming, "Just do it!" at the Russians who decided to lurk too close to those demon fire ants. In the 3rd act of the movie, the whole alien thing comes full circle and we get to see a little bit more information about Oriana's gilded treasure trove. It turns out that unlike our favorite rugged hero, Oriana wasn't doing his thing for fortune and glory, but rather because the little alien voice inside the crystal skull told him to take the skull back to Akator. The skull possesses hypnotic powers, and anyone who looks at it is in danger of having their brain scrambled like Charlie Sheen, and leads Irina and Indy towards the temple. The fact that most people couldn't resist staring into the eyes of the skull for too long reiterates the fear looming over America as they tried to resist living under the shadow of nuclear war threats. And the fact that Irina wanted to use the aliens' knowledge to take over the world hints strongly at the fear of globalization connecting human beings in significant, often detrimental ways. But then, of course, they ruined all that with a real bad CGI alien, and every goddamn scene where Mutt combs his hair with a switchblade. Come on! So there you have it! Indiana Jones 4 actually makes historical sense. If you learned something fun about history today, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons for Nerdwire, or a giant boulder will smash you and squish you and I won't feel bad for you at all.